and also show off my better PowerPoint skills than I've ever had in my life since I came into academia. So let's take a look at where we are now. The latest developments are these. Some people will have heard of next generation sequencing, whole genome sequencing, massively parallel sequencing, all synonymous with these these latest developments. When we first started with forensic DNA, the very first case took in the order of weeks and months to produce. Then we went down to probably a month or 2 months. And would you believe that now the standard turnaround time in the UK for standard DNA is 5 days, from taking the sample into a laboratory to actually having a profile that's loadable to the database. And even more interestingly, the rapid hit DNA technology, that can be now done in 90 minutes. So if you've got a mouth swab, you can actually send it off, you put it in your equipment, send it off to a database or capture it in some other way, and you can get a profile in 90 minutes. If you'd have told me that back in 1986 when my journey with forensic science started, I would have told you that was science fiction, but it is not. Next generation sequencing, synonymous with lots of other technologies, but it is really the ability to look at microvariants. Let me talk about in a moment. We looked at variations in areas of DNA over the years, but this, the next generation sequencing gives us an ability to actually look even deeper and actually look at the microvariability in the profile. We've got new equipment, improved mixture analysis, and people who are interested in artificial intelligence, machine learning. This is really where you will actually add to the mix, because sorting out mixtures now, DNA mixtures, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that later on. That's really where you come into play. But we can generate now lots and lots of DNA, but very often it's all mixed. And the way I've been describing it at NSIT is boxes of jigsaw. If you imagine 2 jigsaw puzzles, 500 pieces each, or even 1,000 pieces each, you have one of the victim, you have one of these the perpetrator, you have one of an innocent bystander, and you throw them all up in the air, and then you have to try to sort out what's left. So we've got improved mixture analysis now using probabilistic genotyping software. Again, talking really to the AI people in the audience. Increased sensitivity. My very early days of DNA, we had to start off with a piece the size of maybe a 10 rupee coin. That was the amount of starting material that we needed in those days. If you fast forward now, we can generate DNA profile from 500 picograms. That's the threshold. We call it the threshold of detection. So where we actually set the bar, have we recovered enough DNA to actually take this one stage further? And that is currently set at half the amount of what it was previously, to 500 picograms. And often, if we get a good sample, it can be taken down to 200 picograms. So on the one hand, that's great. On the other hand, we sometimes we don't actually know what we're growing up. We don't actually know what we're recovering. So we've got increased sensitivity, and then we've got the new kid on the block, forensic investigative genetic genealogy, FIG. Let's just call it investigative genealogy, using genealogy and genetics in combination. And again, I'll tell you more about that. There are many strengths to DNA. It was the next major biometric. We had a fingerprint database back in automated fingerprint services way back in probably about 87, 88 in the place I worked at. So that's been around for a long time, and that revolutionized fingerprint identification, revolutionized the speed of actually doing that. And that's really where we stayed until 1995, when the DNA database was launched, and we had that next major biometric clue, that major biometric facility. So what are the strengths of DNA? It's sometimes referred to as the magic bullet, the silver bullet, the golden bullet, the golden standard of DNA, the golden standard of forensic science. It's actually not. There are things that can go wrong, and we actually need people like you in the audience to actually understand this. We need people like the judges and people in the criminal justice sector to understand this. But we can do all of this. We can look at individualization even more precisely. We can look at some cases that have happened in the past, cold cases, cases that are historic, that have been, left unsolved for many, many years. And we can, most importantly, we can actually look at cases that where people have been wrongly convicted. And we've had a few of those cases over the period. So it's as much about exonerating the innocent as it is about identifying the guilty. So where we are currently, the limitations with this magic bullet of DNA, with collecting DNA at that's low level, we increase the number of chances for innocent contamination. So we've got much more chances now of contamination. Interpretational challenges. So sorting out the mixtures. How can we interpret what we found? So it's sometimes said our ability to extract DNA, our ability to get DNA out from the item is outstripping our ability to interpret. So please, guys, some of you who have the interest in AI, put your thoughts around that, how we can actually sort those out. And then, of course, there's things around ethical concerns. And one of the cases I'm going to show you right at the end is a case where you sort of think, well, have we gone too far with this? Anyone heard of the Golden State Killer, Joseph James DeAngelo? I can see some nods in the audience. So some of you have heard of him, but I'll talk to you about him later on. So the very first case was this guy, Colin Pitchfork. Some of you might remember his face. Colin Pitchfork, back in 1983, murdered two girls very close together. In those days, really all we had was the standard serology tests. So we could actually link the two cases together. We could exonerate people. So if someone didn't match, if they weren't ABO or PGM, we could actually take them out of the equation. But the combination of ABM and PGM gave us like a 10%. So it was really good for exclusion, but no good for inclusion. So this case went on for about a year. These two murders were committed. And just at the time, some of you will have heard of Professor Sir Alec Jeffreys. Anyone heard of that guy's name? Alec Jeffreys from Leicestershire. Just happened to be experimenting at Leicestershire University on DNA, on forensic DNA, and the police service approached him, and that really was the very first case ever that was produced. And it took some time to do it. That's what Pitchfork looks like now. So the other thing, particularly to the youth in the audience, if you can turn back the clock of time, you'll win the Nobel Prize. So that's what he was before. This is what he looks like now. So where do we actually get DNA from in a forensic setting? And I'm going to stress that really this is not a talk about the whole gamut of DNA, but we actually get it, of course, from the individual, from the cell of the individual, from this nucleus of the individual. So we actually dig down into the nucleus, and then we look at the 23 pairs of chromosomes, and we look at specific areas on those chromosomes. We call them polymorphic areas. It means that there's lots and lots of variation. We look at various variations in these things. And then the double helix. And one strand of that helix is from mum, and one strand is from dad. So it is really the chemical recipe that makes up who we are. I often think when people spout about these racial theories, we're all 99% the same DNA. We're all much the same, because much of our DNA codes for arms, for legs and so forth, eyes. So we're all the same. It's just that very tiny bit of non-coding DNA that we actually look at. But there are similarities between siblings. So many of you will have brothers and sisters. And although your profile will not be the same, there will be some similarities. And I think I've got a case study to show you about that later on. We can now get DNA from lots and lots of different areas. So things like chewing gum, cigarette ends, envelopes, stamps. It used to be when you used to have to link the stamp. They were a good source of DNA. Sadly, now they're self-adhesive, not so good. But from all of those samples, we can actually get a piece of evidence that will tell us who the person is. And it's, as I say, it's now become one of the major biometrics with finger marks and with DNA that we actually use to identify our suspects. There's been an evolution of DNA. I told you before about the, the evolution of the train, the steam locomotive. So 1995, the image that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen is what was called multi-locus probes, the type of technique that's a convicted pitchfork type of technique that you'll often see with pictures of Jeffries holding up an autoradiograph. It was like a bar unit, like a supermarket barcode, and where you match the crime scene with the offender or the suspect, you actually could say it was a match. So it was good for comparison with one-to-one. It was no good really for building a database. So 1990 went on to SLP, single locus probes, looking at probes which actually bound to one locus rather than multiple loci. Then in 1994, starting to get excited because we were thinking about launching a database. We were thinking about putting together a national DNA database, the first in the world. And we thought we would actually go with a technique called QUAD, and the clue is in the name. It targeted 4 sites, 4 locations on the genome, and we very quickly realized that 4 sites, and remember 4 sites equals 8 possible combinations, because one of those will be from mum and one from dad. So 4 sites equals 8 possibles. But we actually never went live with that. We went live with what was called second generation multiplex, SGM. That was in 1995. Second generation multiplex because it succeeded those previous multi-locus probe eras. Database goes live in, I think, in April of 1995 to great fanfare. The evolutions beyond that have been more loci put into the mix. So in 1999, we went with second generation multiplex 2, the second generation of that. So the first test had 10 sites. When we went live with the database in 95, that had 10 sites, 20 markers eventually. The next generation had more markers, so it gave us more discriminating power. And coming right the way up to date, in 2021, we went to what was called DNA 17, which targets 17 sites. And it's a little bit like, you imagine a lottery machine, where you have, if you only have 2 balls in your lottery machine, you're going to win the lottery very easily, aren't you? If you put more balls in the lottery machine, it becomes more discriminating. You can't win the lottery so easily. So lots of things we did along the way. Low template number, growing up more DNA from less and less material. We did some work with what was called in those days familial DNA searching, looking for family connections. So all of you who've got brothers and sisters in the audience, you will have a similarity with them. And actually, is there anything that we can do to probe that? So that's a brief evolution of how it worked at the time. In those days, and perhaps slightly changed from nowadays, we now have quantitative PCR, so real-time PCR it's called. But in the days, we would have to extract, and that threshold of detection was very high back in the day. 5 rupee coin, 10 rupee coin, to nowadays where we're looking at 500 picograms to start the process. We then need to quantify, we need to amplify, so using PCR, preliminary chain reaction, to actually, like the genetic photocopier, to grow up the DNA from very little to much more. And then we've got this problem of separation. So separating out the DNA by fragment length. The larger fragments will move at a different rate of knots to the smaller fragments. And then interpretation. And it's that computer screen, guys, where we now have the problem. So please, students, all put your thinking caps on and think how we're actually going to do that. So PCR, that came around in 1994. Just think of it for the non-specialists as a genetic photocopier. So in the day, we would run this for 28 cycles. So we'd put out a DNA sample in, we'd actually heat up the DNA and cool it down, and it would actually copy the DNA exponentially. So one strand would become 2, become 4, etc., 8, 16, 32, and 64, etc. And we would do that for 28 cycles. So that was the next real breakthrough. And of course, that's what it looks like now. So we grow up lots and lots from less and less. So once again, guys, those of you who are thinking of going into work in this field, remember we're starting now with much smaller amounts of material, and you're also growing up this many more times now, because the current multiplex doesn't necessarily go for 28 cycles. It goes for about 32 cycles, 31 or 32 cycles. So you're starting with a smaller amount and actually generating it up lots and lots. So let's take a look at what we observed throughout that whole journey, and I'll keep an eye on the clock if I can. So we get database matches from crime to crime, so scene to scene, as we did with the Lindemann and Dawn Ashworth cases. We get person to scene and we get scene to scene. Scene to scene, Lindemann and Dawn Ashworth. Person to scene, the offender and the victim. And person to person, where people give the wrong details to the police. We found that many of the rapists had previous convictions. These are all things that we actually fathomed out along this way. 90%, 9 out of 10 of these people have previous convictions. You know, they were not just the one-off offender, the serious sexual criminals. Armed robbers, 50%, and there were lots of myths, really, that were smashed by this, by the advent of the DNA database. We found also that forensic science was used more extensively than we ever thought. This was a study done by the National Police Improvement Agency back in 2009, and they said that DNA was used in almost 100% of murders. That's in a country of our size, so I marvel actually at what the effect could be in India, you know, the numbers that you have in your country. So lots of other things. DNA match rate, of course, is very high, so around about 40%. So really every time we load something to a database, it gives us a match in very tall order. We also found that there was no specialism between offenders. So people who we were thought of necessarily as, as a lower criminal. So this guy here, John Wood, you can see, read the offence, what he did. He raped, indecently assaulted two young girls in Canterbury in 1988. When the database went live, normally he actually wouldn't have been sampled because it was a lower offence, but he was arrested for this offence, mouth swabbed, and he actually matched against these two people, these two young girls. So being arrested for a small crime led on to this very serious offence. We've looked at mitochondrial DNA over the years. Mitochondrial DNA maternally inherited from the mother. Very often that was at the time a last resort for, if he couldn't recover any DNA, let's try to look at mitochondrial DNA. And I'll explain that with a case study. Anyone heard of the Russian royal family, the Romanov family, the Bolshevik, the Russian royal family, the Romanovs? Well, for many years, these people had gone missing. They were executed back in 1918. It was the Russian royal family when the Bolsheviks came to power. Rumor had it that they were thrown down a well in Katerinburg in Russia. And for many years, people were coming forward to say, I'm the descendant of the Tsar. And so back in my time at the Forensic Science Service, the Russians approached us and said, actually, is there anything that you can do with this? And although we perhaps didn't realize it at the time, this was that precursor of looking at familial or forensic genealogy. Because this is the family tree of the Russian royal family. You can see this line here, Alexei, Maria, Tatiana, Olga, and so forth. They were the children of Nicholas III and the Tsarina Alexandria. You may have even seen the movie about Rasputin and so forth. It was all that era. And so they were the people who were allegedly found. They did actually find some bodies in Katerinburg, and they wanted to know who these victims were. And so we walked up the family tree, and we actually do the same thing then as we do now. We look for the point of similarity. We look at that point of convergence, where two family trees join. You all know that we have two sides of our family tree, mum's side and dad's side, and where the two join is where we actually started. So this goes up, and these people will all have the same mitochondrial DNA. So all of these children, all of the females, Tsarina Alexandria, Princess Alice, Princess Victoria, Alice of Battenberg, and in fact, even going down, pardon me, to then the Prince Philip, who sadly died since, but taking a sample from him, so they all shared the same mitochondrial DNA as did, from these bodies. So we then looked at doing some familial DNA. Can we look for matches that, like close matches? So we don't have this person on the database, but actually, we have a son of his on the database. And we've only just been talking about this case today at NSIT. It was the first case where we looked at familial kinship analysis. So remember, Joseph Kaplan is not on the database. He died before this happened. You can actually read what happened. He was a Welsh serial rapist. And he was arrested. He was apprehended because his son carried on offending. So Kaplan had died. His son was born. He went on to commit offences. And the similarity between Paul Kaplan, the son, and Joseph was striking. So that was Operation Magnum, and that was the very first case of familial DNA searching that we ever did worldwide, identifying Joseph Kaplan. And we identified him through his son, because, of course, he was half the profile of Joseph Kaplan. We had it also, I think we had his brother. So we could build up a genetic picture. Around about 75%, we got about 3/4 of the way. We couldn't actually do it totally, but this guy was actually captured with that technique for the first time. And we've just been talking today at NSIT that, the real human factor to all of this forensic science is that there are real life victims on the end of this. Sandra Newton is a girl who would now have been a mum. She would have probably been a grandmother, and she was killed at the age of 16. And if we've got the opportunity to capture these people, if we've got the opportunity to stop these offences, then we should do all we can. And so we search for family members. We search in two ways. We look at the database horizontally and vertically. So the search number one is the genetic relationship between your parents and your children, so half each. And then the search number two is the genetic relationship between siblings. Are you with me? So you're half of your parents, and you will bear a similarity with your siblings also. So Operation Magnum was launched. This is the Kaplan era. So they took some samples. They had a budget to swab some people. It led to nothing. And then it matched eventually to a lad who was the son of Joseph Kaplan. Remember, Kaplan had died, but the son had actually continued to offend, and his genetic profile looked very similar to this case that happened all those years ago, back in the 70s. And of course, then it ultimately meant that we, at some stage, he had to be exhumed. We have lots of burials in the UK. I think, unlike cremations, I think you have more in India. But he was exhumed, and that was the very first case worldwide. And that was brought about because he had a similarity between his son and his father. This is another guy coming further toward the front of time. This is a guy who had a shoe fetish. He was raping victims in the north of England, stealing their footwear. This guy was never ever on the database, but his sister had a bit of a nervous meltdown on one occasion. She'd been arrested for drinking, well, not for drinking and driving, for just drinking inside the vehicle. So she was arrested. A mouth swab was taken. She didn't match on the database, but she was a close match, if you see what I mean. Are you with me? She was a very close match, and so that's how James Lloyd was detected. We found lots of things about, some of you might be interested in criminology. We found things about the patterns of offending, because so now we could track all of these victims, all of these suspects, all of these offenders, and actually look at what they'd done prior to these from growing up. And the criminologists tell us that people who are going to become deviant start to go deviant at about 10 or 15 years of age. And then they go up this ascending pattern. It's like a Gaussian curve. And till around about 21, then they come down the other side. That's the standard pattern. So the criminologists tell us. Sadly, with violent sexual criminals, they don't seem to follow this pattern. And that the program I ran at the Home Office really proved this, because we had offenders who were continuing to offend really late into old age, really. people of 78 years of age were still committing these offences. They don't stop. They don't stop, guys, until you stop them. And of course, if we don't do this quickly enough, we leave more opportunities for more offences, more victims, and so we need to do this as quickly as we possibly can. Lots of them on this on the program I ran, lots of them had pre-convictions for rape. So just once again underscoring what we found with this. 90% of them continued to offend after the offence that we captured them for, and about just over 4 out of 10 were for smaller offences, theft and so forth. This is another one, Antonio Emilia, who was committing his offences around the M25. He was raping victims around the M25. And just look at when you actually put the locations and the ages of these victims on this spreadsheet. The first victim was 10 years of age. Now, of course, we can never really stop that first offence because you have to have a DNA match. It has to match against something. But what I would say to you, what about the next victim? If you'd have had that guy's profile on the database at the time, that spree of offences would have been stopped. He would have been arrested and it would have been stopped. Next victim, 26, 30 years of age, 18 years of age. The last victim, almost the last victim, 13 and 14. How do you go to a victim's family and actually say, I'm really, really sorry, your daughter of 13 has been raped, when we actually could have done something about it? So let's just look where we are now. In 2017, we've had all of this piece of kit. It's called next generation sequencing. It's actually not next generation at all. It's been around for a long, long time, but it's just new to forensic science. So we've now got enhanced capillary electrophoresis. The middle one is this rapid hit DNA technology, the ability to actually get you a sample from, in 90 minutes from start to finish. That will actually get you a profile that's loadable. And then next generation sequencing. So the next gen sequencing technique at number 3. Current multiplexers are very sensitive. We've mentioned that already. We get lots of DNA from smaller and smaller amounts of starting material. So 6 picograms of material in each cell, and 200 picograms on occasions actually starts this whole process off. So we've gone from the 10 rupee coin size to 2 or 500 picograms, infinitely small amounts of DNA. And that really, guys, is anything that touches your skin, and any watch strap, any spectacles, any collar that's touching your skin, anything really that's touching your skin, we can actually now get a DNA profile from. So the ability to actually extract and find DNA has massively increased, but with sensitivity and discrimination, the benefits of sensitivity and discrimination come the problems of being to identify what we've grown up, what do we actually have. So the key word on the bottom there is now, can we attribute these? So in the old days, we could actually attribute these samples to a semen sample or a blood sample. Nowadays, if I were to brush this lectern like so, I've left enough DNA on my hand on this lectern to actually start the whole process. If I went on then to shake hands with you and you transferred it, it would transfer to a lower amount, but it would transfer. So the key words now in forensic circles are transfer and persistence. How did it transfer? How long would it last? So as we've said, 500 picograms starts this whole process now. And we moved to ever more sensitive DNA. This was a very sad case from the Belfast, from the Northern Ireland, the Dunblane bombings. Was it the Dunblane bombings or? Sorry, I beg your pardon, the Omagh bombings. And this is where we used low copy number DNA. We had 28 cycles in the day. We said, well, actually, if we run this a little bit longer in PCR, if we make more copies, will it give us more, more chances? And yes, it did. But we were criticised quite heavily for not following the correct processes. And so that's what low template number DNA did for us at the time. That was the standard test. You can see we've got very, very small peaks. If you run this for longer in PCR, then it will give you much more starting material. But just to give you some idea of where we are now with the sensitivity of DNA, if you imagine a single sugar crystal being about 1 microgram, divide that by 1,000, further divide that by 1,000, gives you 1 picogram. So remember, this is just from one grain of sugar. And so that's the levels we're dealing with now. And if you multiply that sum with 500, that gives you where we start. So guys, on the one hand, the low sensitivity, we actually just never found it. That was the issue there. You never found it because our techniques weren't sensitive enough. Look where we are now in terms of high sensitivity. We can actually get more and more DNA from less and less. But are you picking up the clue that actually we're also growing up lots of background contamination also? I think I've mentioned that SGM plus and DNA 17 already. So the present is it works better with degraded samples. It's more sensitive and it can work backwards as well as forwards. So it will work on cases that have been previously unidentified. But it's often talked about as being a double-edged sword. Have we gone too far with sensitivity? Should we not? Should we go back to the one nanogram threshold, half of where we are now? Should we actually go down to those low levels of recovery? Because of course it does cause a problem. Is it a double-edged sword? So let me just explain the problem you have at the end of this process. We've gone all the way through that interpretation, extraction and so forth. We get to the end and we have a mixture of, I've called it jigsaw pieces, but it could be this type of, and again, I realize that this type of dish is not very commonplace in India, but it's something that we feed to our kids as youngsters. It's called alphabet soup, alphabet spaghetti. Anyone heard of that? You might not be popular in India, but it's spaghetti, it's pasta made into letters, and it's mixed in with tomato sauce, and the kids can make little words with it and so forth. So that's how it's. But you see, in this occasion, you've got this bowl of alphabet soup, you've got a mixture, and in there, you can actually make the name John Q. Suspect. But also in that bowl of soup, you can also make some other names as well. And that, guys, very simply is the crux of what's happening now. We actually can't do it. Is it John? Is it John O? Is it Patrick Quinn? Who is it? Once again, this is where AI and machine learning is going to come to the fore. Let's look at the latest techniques. Speed is the essence now. We spoke about rapid hit DNA. We can do this now in around about 90 or 80 minutes. Sensitivity, much better now. Opportunities for contamination, we've said that's the downside. So if we don't handle this correctly, if those of you going to work in forensic science, if you don't wear proper protective equipment, you will contaminate. So we're much more focused on that nowadays. So what do? Conventional testing has been around now for a long time. It's well tested, it's tried and tested. It's easy to load to a database. It's very well accepted. But what do we do if if there's insufficient information? What do we do if there's no match on the database? What can we actually do? Can we do anything? Well, one of the things we can do is to look at this technique called massively parallel sequencing. Some of you might have heard of that. Anyone heard of that technique, massively parallel sequencing? No? Sometimes referred to as next generation sequencing, whole generation sequencing. And what it means is that it can do lots and lots of these tests at once. And it will work better with degraded material. It will work better with smaller amounts of material. It will work better with compromised samples. So if we've had something that's been compromised by the environment, this is really where this comes in. Now, when we look at conventional DNA, it's quite straightforward. When we get to the end of this whole process, we have these repeating sequences of, you've probably seen them, GATA, guanine, adenine, thymine, and cytosine, and those will repeat in certain lengths. So if we look at this person 1 and person 2, person 1 has a 9 repeat, and person 3 has a 10 repeat. And combine those with both the mum and the dad, that's how we actually make the match. So the actual matching of this process is much easier. And we look at these, we call them mini satellites. Some of you might have heard of mini satellites. Small pieces of on that chromosome that we actually look at for lots of variation. We're actually probing the next generation of this now to actually look at even more variability. So that's massively parallel sequencing. That's what it gives us. And remember, this is from the worst samples ever you could ever imagine. It's being used commonly nowadays in bodies that are being brought back from Ukraine. Small fragments of soldiers who have been killed in Ukraine. And lots of young forensic scientists like yourselves are actually working on these samples to actually give closure to the victims. And the technique that we use the technique that's being used there is this massively parallel sequencing. Why? Because those samples are too badly degraded. They're too badly compromised to do anything else. So we're going to look now at the variability between, on one site. So that's really what that's saying. It's not looking across the whole site, but actually looking at the variability on, can you see position 5, let's call it. One of the things that I do at Kent is to add some primers into my slides. Actually, for students who actually don't really understand some of this, there actually is a primer there. If you want to dig into that, you can access it by the QR code. It will actually open up to a primer that tells you more about the topic if you want to read deeper. So this is what the platform is called for, or certainly one platform, the MySec platform, for you looking at next generation sequencing. It's a new platform in contrast to the standard capillary electrophoresis that we used for conventional STR profiling. So that's what that piece of kit does. It prepares, it sequences, and it analyzes all in one. This is the kit, the actual assays that we use. We use them in preparation, sequencing, and analysis at the end. So it's a different way of doing things. But can you see that the whole process now can look at all of these things at the same time? The forensic prep kit can look at STRs. It can look at YSTRs, STRs that just appear on the male side of the equation. It can look at XSTRs, similarly STRs that only appear on the female part of this. We can look at SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. So another technique very different to what we've been looking at with STRs. It can look at biological and ancestry tips, SNPs. We can look at some phenotypes also. So is there anything that we can actually tell from these profiles that gives an idea of what this person might look like? And we do that all in one assay now. It can be done all in one assay. It's quite expensive. And this is just a summary of the biology that we would actually use. The DNA extraction, the DNA quantitation, PCR amplification of multiple loci all at the same time. Technology is library preparations, genotype determinations, and the application is both reference samples, so buccal scrapes, and also population databases. This kit was launched in 2015, so none of this is next generation at all, really. It's not next generation, it's been around for a long, long time. But it took some time to get it accredited, so I'll quickly move on from that. So this is really for using with those really bad samples, going back to the Roanoff case, samples that have been down that well, been buried for years and years, badly compromised, very poor samples that we wouldn't, back in the day, we hardly would touch because we knew that we were just not going to get anything out of them. So SNP is really has somewhere to go, I think. I remember at the time some talk when we were launching the database in the run-up, well, should we actually go with short tandem repeats, STRs, a type of technique that we actually use now, or should we actually go with SNP? Should we actually go with single nucleotide polymorphisms? By the time we were having that debate, we'd gone too far down the track to actually go back to square one So it depends upon what type of kit we'll use, the quality and quantity. And these three options are here currently. We can use the SNP microarray. Remember now, guys, this is for the really most challenging samples that we have. This is not for the standard samples that we're going to run through the database from a standard run-of-the-mill crime scene. This is for the cases that come back from Ukraine, or perhaps from, God forbid, the cases that we're using, the air crash in Ahmedabad. Samples that were really so badly compromised that we couldn't do anything with them conventionally. We can look at this targeted intelligence kit, and you can actually see the benefits and disbenefits. The SNP microarray is the most inexpensive. The targeted ones is a mid-range cost, and perhaps some of this will be useful for, for in-house laboratories when if you decide to actually move that way. And the whole generation sequencing, the next gen, the whole gen sequencing, looking at lots and lots more sites, is more expensive. But those are the starting materials. You can actually see 50 picograms we can start with, 200 nanograms we need for SNP microarray, 15 picograms for the middle one. So we can get more and more from less and less. This is not compatible with the DNA database, but it's to be used in those very serious cases, like, God forbid, the air crash in Ahmedabad, where you want to actually identify the parts of the victims' bodies. So we can actually do this. This slide just really shows that we can actually do all of this in sequence. We don't have to run different assays. We don't have to run different tests. All of this is done in one. We call it kit. And kit really means the combination of enzymes that we actually use for separation and so forth. So that's really where we currently are. The benefits are great. It can work, as we've said, better with DNA, degraded DNA. And so this is really what we're looking at here. So can you see, we talked earlier on about these repeating sequences, this GATA, and we really haven't had time to go into that in really great detail. But we actually count the numbers of repeating sequences, and we compare them then against a population database. But can you see within we now have this concept called microvariants. So this is actually looking for variation actually within the variation itself, if you see what I mean. So we're digging down even further to actually give us more discrimination. So 2002 along came familial DNA searching. We mentioned that already a little bit with Joseph Kappan. We were doing that for some time. The FSS, my former employer, we were the first to actually do that. And where are we now? So we've gone from familial DNA searching. This is really where you have, you don't have anyone on the database. Joseph Kappan was not on the database, but his son was. But there was a connection between the criminal database and Joseph Kappan. Where we actually are now is one stage beyond this. So this is the latest from the DNA, from the USA. Anyone heard of this story? Joseph James D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, he was called. He was called the Golden State Killer. And he murdered and raped lots of victims over quite a long span of offending. He had actually been a police officer. So some of these offences were committed whilst he was a police officer. But if you want to actually scan that code, it will actually tell you the story about D'Angelo. There's actually a little podcast in it also, so you can hear all what happened. And the difference between that is that with this guy, there was none of the family at all that were anywhere ever near a DNA database. Any of you sent off your mouth swab to an ancestry DNA company? Anyone ever done that? Are they advertised? Are these services advertised often in India? You can take a mouth swab, you can send it off, put it in a package, send it off to a company, and they will tell you that you're 10% Irish or that type of thing. They look at the SNPs. They look at the SNP data, and so that's what they were doing there. So these people are never been anywhere near a criminal database, but they're using those ancestry type SNPs to actually say, look, can we find some similarities? So this has got the Golden State Killer, Joseph D'Angelo, and if you look at the press, almost every day now there are new cases coming out. Very, very violent man, very sadistic man. As it says that a police officer had been a police officer, and the advent really of a technique now called forensic investigative genetic genealogy, FIG, F-I-G-G. It uses this type of technique, so not the standard counting of the bases, but actually these gene chips. Let me just show you that slide, because I think this summarizes really how they actually did this case. Remember, guys, this guy was captured because one of his relatives had actually submitted a DNA sample to an ancestry company to actually determine whether they were, what proportion of the population they were from. So this, number one, is the DNA was collected from the crime scene 20 or 30 years ago. It was run through initially the standard STR tests and gave really no match, gave a link probably between so we knew the cases were connected, but beyond that we had no offender. So they looked back, as we did with the Russian royal family, looking back up either side of the family tree to this point here, where you get to the point of similarity. You actually get to that point of common ancestry, it's called. So remember, 50% of your DNA is from mum and dad, 25% from grandparents, around about an eighth from cousins. So looking at these similarities up both sides of that family tree, until you get to this point of common ancestry, and then you work down the backside. And so that's how, for the first time ever, Capon was, so this guy was arrested, not Capon, but Joseph D'Angelo. Phenotyping, depending upon who you talk to, phenotyping is either a myth or it's on the horizon. But remember, what we've talked about already tonight is the genotype, your genotype, and not your phenotype. Your phenotype is about telling you actually how you look. It governs actually, what your facial features are. But there are very often, comments in the press about people who are in China. I've heard about in China where people are being identified by people spitting on the floor, or by by leaving chewing gum on the floor, and actually analysing that and actually producing not a DNA match, but actually a picture of what the person might look like. And then I'm told that they plaster these pictures all around the railway station in an effort really to shame the individuals. So that's really the future of that. So that's all I have for you guys. Thanks ever so much for listening. I've gone through it very quickly. Would have liked to have taken more time, but hopefully I've come out on time. Yes, and time for one or two questions, I think. So that's just my bio, and that's beautiful Kent. That's the University of Kent, actually looking over the valley into the cathedral below. So thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. A difficult subject explained in such a manner. I do have some idea of DNA and that kind of thing, but this is a very wide spectrum of thing you say. As we know, recently we had a airplane crash, Air India crash, plane crash, and that is why everybody started understanding or knowing that there is something called DNA profiling, which help a great deal in matchmaking. Unfortunate, it's a very unfortunate part, but that was something which was a blessing in disguise. So it is not only the crime and the kind of thing, and a lot of things like next generation sequencing. Now this is something this is going to happen. Phenotypes, as he last said. Things such things always keep on developing. Those who are in the field, they know. We have to keep abreast, and that is why we are honored. We are lucky that a distinguished person from this was there. Many more things to know, many more things to learn. But what we have learned today is a great thing to build up upon. We have some time, about let's say 10 minutes or so. If anybody has any question, most welcome to ask the question now. Yeah, please.
Professor Green, I would like to know of what is the future of DNA forensics with AI in the field now, Do you think AI is a foe or a friend of future DNA forensics?
I think initially, I think that AI, machine learning, will help us to get the algorithms better for understanding mixtures, sorting out those mixture interpretations. It looks very simple on the screen, but very often it's very complex, and sometimes we can recover the material, but we can't separate out the component parts. So it will be useful for that. It will be useful in the process flows. So actually, how does this material flow through the whole criminal justice process? So I think there are many aspects of AI that will be useful for this. But initially, I would think the algorithms for matching, going a little bit beyond DNA, but fingerprints, for example, fingerprint matching algorithms now are getting more and more precise. So those will be benefits as well. So the one that immediately springs up to my mind is mixture interpretation, and being able to get more and more out of less and less starting material. So we might actually go down even further, maybe from 500 picograms. Who knows?
But as you know, AI is being used for negative purposes also, and especially in the police and forensics, there's a lot of scope for manipulation of the data.
Oh, indeed, yes.
I'm a police officer, so for 35 years I have seen many such cases. So how do you prevent or ensure that AI doesn't negatively impact the results of a DNA forensic analysis?
Well, it should always be backed up by a human intervention at the end. It should always be backed up by a professional checker. In fact, two professional checkers, people who will check it and then recheck the match. But you're absolutely correct. And what this brings me around to really is talking a little bit about confirmation bias. Confirmation bias now is the blight of many forensic processes in worldwide. And what that really means is where you have a clue, and as an ex-police officer, you'll realize that you have a clue in your investigation, and then all the evidence is constructed around that clue. So I worry where we have a really poor DNA sample that gives us a potential match, that already the checkers are going to be biased. They're going to say, actually, this is the clue, and then they construct the evidence around it. So it will be only overcome by some rigorous quality assurance standards, by some rigorous checking, and some standards for actually saying, look, if we get something that is of such low quality, that we're not going to even touch it. But I was looking actually at an article the other day about the use of AI in policing to predict crime trends. And what they were saying is, well, garbage in, garbage out. And they were saying that internationally, that police crime data was not very good, was not very robust. So you then put that into a database, it throws you out some patterns of offending, and you take those as gospel. And when in fact, the original data source is not very good.
What happens in India especially is that forensic evidence is still corroborative, not the main evidence. You cannot convict a victim or accused with just forensic medicine, no, except in rare cases.
Well, we've always said, even from the very early days of the DNA database going live, that the DNA database, the DNA match, is for intelligence purposes only. DNA evidence needs good police officers to understand the strengths and the limitations. And that really is one of the challenges I think we'll have in India, turning the technology actually into tangible, usable outputs. And that will only be come by quality police officers, people who actually understand the science, understand the limitations, understand the strengths. But it's not uncommon nowadays for us to actually have a match. I mean, when I was in the forensic science, when I was in the Home Office, I would see the matches every week. The DNA matches used to come out at the order of about 840 per week. So there are lots and lots of cases that come out. That's in a country of our size. Imagine what that will be in India. So the challenge will be for the police service and for the whole of the criminal justice process to actually manage the throughput of this, to actually manage just what comes out at the end. But once again, this does not usurp the skills of the police officer. In fact, it enhances them, because remember, this will only give you a name. Then actually that needs investigating. So you need professional investigators to actually understand this. So I don't know if that's answered your question, but that's some ramblings from the past.
All right.
So with your permission, can I add a few points?
Sure.
Yeah. Actually, I would like to add here that along with AI, we need to have blockchain also here for tracking the particular, whether there's any manipulation at any end or not. Suppose a DNA sample has been collected and submitted for examination. Now, is there any manipulation in between? So for that, actually, blockchain is the right mechanism. So now what actually is evolving is blockchain along with AI is being used in forensics also in a big way. So I think so this is the future, and this can answer your question where any manipulation can be immediately noticed and action can be taken. So I think so this is going to be the game changer ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Any question? Yeah, please. You can take the mic.
Namaskar. My question is, apart from the manipulation, are there examples in later stage, once a person is on the basis of DNA has been established that is a criminal, and later stage, after many years, it was found that analysis was not okay and unnecessary somebody has been punished?
Oh yes, we have had some cases where they've been contaminated. So we've had some mix-ups in the laboratory where samples have been mixed, and people have actually gone on. Thank goodness, not for a long time, but they've been sent on remand when in fact we've actually made a mistake in the lab. Sure. I mean, cases like where samples have been mixed up in a lab. Cases where the guy a classic one from a few years ago, where a guy was sent to prison. He was convicted. He was sent to prison, and at the time of him going to prison, the police officers knew that he could not have deposited semen on that victim. They knew that. The scientists, the doctors told them, and yet they said nothing, and they let the person go to jail. So that's one of the very, very sad cases from our history. So it means that we really all have to do the right thing, and it will be a challenge. It will be a real challenge for India, the size of the country. So yes, we have had quite a few of these cases over the years where things haven't worked as well as we thought. Literally now with contamination is going to be the key one. Is it contamination, or is the transfer accidental, or is it incidental? Is it as part of the offence, or is it just a coincidental match?
Just to answer your point, well taken, sir. Basically, what you're talking is Innocence Project, right? So Innocence Project has been rolled out very well in US, and there are 384 exonerations based on fresh DNA evidence, fresh psychological investigations. So the world needs such projects where wrong convictions and the relatives are challenging those convictions after few years. So that can be taken care by Innocence Project. So that some research is going on in India. Coming to Honorable IPS Officer's question regarding circumstantial evidence or corroborative evidence of forensic science, the new law BNSS 176(3) now says that all punishable offences where the punishable offence is 7 years or above, forensic presence is a must. Right, sir? So the new law is in place, and slowly forensic science will be evolving. I will not say it will replace the direct oral evidence or direct circumstantial, but as a corroborative evidence in coming years, it has to prove a point beyond reasonable doubt of acceptability before the judiciary. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Can we discuss after?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any figure what is the possibility of accuracy in DNA?
Sir, what you are talking is basically addressed in US already by Robert's law. In India also we take care that whatever reports we are generating, they are meeting the minimum standards of Robert's law, where the standard operating procedures what we are using in the laboratory negate the problems of statistical errors, right? So we have a set of precedences where the reports have been cited well and references have been cited well. We've also had a number of cases that have been contaminated by police officers who have not handled the scene correctly. So, it's a game changer for all of us.
Interactive session, and thank you also, both of you.
Thank you.
Okay, now request Professor Dr. Sailesh Suryanarayan Iyer. He is a principal NSIC ISCS to propose vote of thanks. And all the people, I'm sure you must have given your feedback form. If not, you please give it. We at ANA would love to have your feedback. And please keep coming to ANA programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Parveen Good sir, for being a wonderful host, and I think so we enjoyed your hospitality and your hosting equally. Thank you very much, Robert Green sir, for, as usual, having a very lively session. And a lot of case studies he has, but because of paucity of time, probably he is not able to dwell on many of them. Because at NSIT, he was there yesterday and today, 2 days. And he has been really giving the students a lot of input regarding how to actually be more ethical forensic experts. So a few of the questions actually deliberated on that how can the manipulation be stopped? I think so. The only thing we are looking forward to is that we have more ethical forensic experts. We have more ethical police officers, as we have probably here. So we are looking forward to more such ethical practices being adopted so that we are able to give the kind of output as far as criminal justice as well as overall sustainability justice is concerned that can be delivered. So that is one thing which is totally separate. How technology can govern, actually technology can help a lot, but wherever corruption, wherever malified intentions are there probably technology can also be manipulated at a larger stage. So few mechanisms, as I suggested, AI and blockchain can help, but up to what degree, again, there will be a lot of people who will find out some loopholes in that also. So this is an going on process, and this I think so will have to be addressed later by young professionals who are budding professionals. We'll have to give them the benefit of doubt on how they are performing.
We plan another session. Because this is a vast subject, and with your suggestions, we will work out one more.
And we at NSIT IFSCS, Institute of Forensic Science and Cybersecurity, affiliated with National Forensic Science University, Gandhinagar, are very much dwelling on all these topics related to forensic science and cybersecurity. So, I mean, we are conducting a lot of workshops. We'll be conducting a lot of workshops and events in conjunction with AMA, who has been supporting us very well. And this particular event is also a part of that only. So, we are looking forward to the support of all the audience, and we also would like to enlighten them on all the subjects related to cybersecurity and forensic science. As of now, I have been given the rather responsibility of delivering the vote of thanks. So I would like to stick to that in particular. I would like to thank the entire management of NSIT IFSCS for planning this event, motivating us for the same. As a principal, I have been instrumental in following their directions. I am also thankful to AMA for providing the stage to Robert Green sir, and Robert Green sir for agreeing to motivate the students and working faculty members as well as other professionals for attending this session. I would like to thank my colleague, Director, Training and Consultancy, Professor Ravi Kumar sir, also for deliberating on this topic and for being constantly in support with me. I would also like to thank the audience for being a very active audience and interactive audience. And I'm looking forward to many much such interactions in the future. We are definitely open to visits from your end. So if anyone has any queries, they can also write to us or mail to us or mail to Robert Greenson, or they can directly contact us at NSIT also. We would be love to be hosting such workshops in the future. Thank you very much.